You're listening to the Sketchnote Army Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook, and this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey everyone, this is Mike, and I'm here with William Warren. William, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Mike, I'm super excited to be here. Really looking forward to this conversation. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm really a big admirer of the work you're doing, the company that you've founded and that you're doing work with, and all the people that you employ are awesome, so couldn't wait to have you on. Alejo was actually on last season. He's one of your employees, one of your right-hand men, I guess.
Yep.
Really excellent guy, and I thought, well, we need to have William on so he can talk a little bit more about the business stuff and his journey, because you're involved in that business too. So before I talk anymore, let me stop and ask, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Well, before I introduce myself, yes, Alejo's awesome. I listened to y'all's podcast. He did a great job. One of our stellar teammates at the Sketch Effect. We'll talk more about that, but we have an awesome team. It's the best part of my job is the people I get to work with, including Alejo and others. And the admiration is mutual, Mike. I mean, I'm sure every podcast guest you have tells you that they have bought your book and love your book. And so from the beginning, I've been a big fan of yours and the work that you're doing. And so the admiration is entirely mutual. And so I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to talk to you.
Thanks.
All right. So what was the question? Sorry.
So for those who don't know, William is just recently a new dad for the third time, and his synapses are a little bit slower than normal. So we'll.
Yes. I have a 3-week-old at home, and so if I slur my words or if I say things that are incoherent, I'm just going to blame it on my kid, which is a great thing to do. It's like one of the parent privileges. Like as soon as you become a parent, you have an immediate excuse for things. You're like, oh, it's my kid's fault, whatever. So
sorry, I'm late.
Sorry, I'm late. Sorry, I'm not making sense. Sorry, I'm, whatever. But cool. All right. So you were going to say or introduce myself, right?
Yeah. Who you are and what you do, and if you want to go right into your origin story, just take the floor.
Yeah, sure. So my name is William Warren, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm in Atlanta right now. And I am the founder and CEO of a company called the Sketch Effect. And I love what we do. We've been around now for about 8 years, and we have a team, a full-time team. We have a team of contractors we work with. And we'll talk more about what we do, but I just love my job. I love that I get to do visual communication for a living. I love that I get to work with awesome people, and I love that we get to serve awesome clients and help them communicate their ideas and make them more successful. I love all those things about business. But the origin story is interesting because I never set out to become an entrepreneur. I never set out to own a business. I never even set out to be a Sketchnote person or like a graphic recorder. None of that was ever on my radar. So My story is entirely an organic just thing that unfolded and took me along the ride. So to tell my story, I'm going to rewind the clock back to when I was a kid, which is that when I was a kid, I always loved drawing. From a young age, I could not stop drawing and doodling, whether it was comics or drawing Disney characters or sketching little illustrations or doodling in class. I was always drawing. And so I pursued that professionally for many years with the aim of becoming a professional cartoonist. So all through high school and college, and then afterwards I had comic strips, I did editorial cartooning, won some awards in college, and was really excited about the idea of being a professional newspaper comic book artist or comic strip creator. And then just to give you a little bit of context, I graduated from college in 2008, which was the recession, right. And the newspaper print industry was imploding. So the prognosis or the potential of getting hired to be a syndicated comic strip artist was very low. So my career pivoted a few times, and I ended up in a corporate marketing job at Chick-fil-A here in Atlanta. Do you have Chick-fil-A's up in Milwaukee?
We do,
Mike?
Yeah. They're very popular now. We have I think 3 that have opened in the city. It took a long time, but they're hugely popular.
Yeah.
Lines all out the door every day.
Oh yeah,
except Sunday, of course.
except Sunday. You could write a whole book on operational efficiency and operational excellence just of the Chick-fil-A drive-through, and it's incredible what they've done. But anyways, I ended up in a entry-level part-time marketing job at Chick-fil-A corporate here in Atlanta. So my role was in marketing, but it was not a traditionally creative role. I wasn't drawing or illustrating or designing. I was leading, working with creative agencies. I was working with a team. I was doing things like email marketing and working with SEO agencies, and loved the role. It was awesome. I had a great team. I had a great boss. I loved being immersed in a really great corporate culture, being surrounded by inspiring leaders, learning about business, learning about marketing, learning about branding, learning about all these things that I really did not know a whole lot about. However, after about 2 years of that, I realized that the creative part of my soul, the part of my soul that loved to draw and illustrate and communicate ideas with pictures, was starting to shrivel up. It was starting to wither on the vine. And so the origin story of the Sketch Effect really begins with trying to inject some creativity into my day-to-day 9 to 5 when I was in that role. And so when I was in a meeting, I would have my notebook, but instead of taking notes normally, I would doodle in my notes. I didn't know this sketchnoting thing existed at the time. This is just me trying to make these meetings a little bit less boring, a little bit more fun. So I would doodle in my notes, which is what I would do all through high school and college anyways. This was nothing new for me, but I would doodle in my notes. If we were having a small team meeting, I'd hop up on the whiteboard and maybe I would sketch some of the notes on the whiteboard for everyone to see. If I was leading a presentation, I might draw out my concepts, scan them in, and put them into my PowerPoint deck. And like I said, for me, this was just a creative outlet. This is just a way for me to inject some creativity into my role, to have some fun, and to stay awake if the meeting was particularly boring. Not many were boring, but occasionally, had to keep myself alert. Now the magic really started to happen. The lights really started to click when I realized that the people around me found value in what I was bringing to that meeting context, to that business context. They said, "Hey, this drawing thing is really cool. Like, I really love, like, this meeting was more effective because you provided these sketches, or this presentation was more effective because you presented your information, not only with words, but with pictures." And so word spread that there was this guy named William in the marketing department who did this weird drawing thing. And the Chick-fil-A corporate office has like zillions of whiteboards. They're everywhere, and they're big. They'll be like 24 feet wide, 12 feet high, like massive whiteboards.
Wow.
So I had supply chain ask me to come sketch their meeting, HR, Corp Comp, like different teams around the organization say, "William, come help our meeting." Thankfully, I had a really cool boss. He was like, "As long as you get your work done, I don't care. Go help out." So I started doing this sketching thing for different teams. And then the light bulbs really went off when people outside the organization saw what I was doing and offered to pay me real money and buy me real airline tickets to travel to their meetings and their events and do the sketching thing. So I started to peel back the layers. I got on Google. I found this weird book called the Sketchnote Handbook by this guy named Mike Road. I thought it was Mike Road for many years, like Rhode Island, and I realized I was wrong about that. Learned that there were other awesome companies out there doing this visual communication work. I realized that was what it was called, visual communication, and that there was a whole industry around this idea of graphic recording, graphic facilitation, and I was really intrigued by it. And so did a few gigs as a side hustle, took PTO, flew to Dallas, Texas for an event, flew to New Orleans for an event, flew to DC for an event. And after a couple of after doing these events, realizing how much I loved it and getting good feedback, I could see that there was momentum, and decided to quit my job and start a business called the Sketch Effect. And that was 2013, a little over 8 years ago. And side note, I had just gotten married at the time. And so to anyone out there who's listening and thinking about quitting your job, make sure you run it by your spouse first.
Yes.
Because that's probably not a good thing for a newly married woman to hear her husband, her well-employed husband, to say, "I'm going to quit my job and start this random business." But thankfully, I have a really cool wife. She's awesome and very supportive. And so we've had a great journey. And so yeah, I'll stop there. That was a lot, and we can unpack that further. But
no, that's great.
yeah,
That's really great.
Like I said, never set out to start a business, but it was just this kind of thing where there was momentum. I was excited about it, and so I just pursued the idea.
It's almost like the business demanded that you do what it wanted, right? In some ways.
Exactly. I've told people before, I felt like there was a train like leaving the station, and I could either get on and kind of go for a ride and see where it went, or I could let it go. And so thankfully I took the risk and decided to jump on the train.
That's an interesting metaphor. Interesting side note, you mentioned Chick-fil-A. For 2 years, I actually was flown in by Chick-fil-A to do sketchnoting at the Chick-fil-A Leadercast back in, it might have been right about that time. You probably were employed at Chick-fil-A at the same time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I remember that. Because back in the day, Chick-fil-A was a sponsor of Leadercast, and they did sketch notes. And actually, they used me to do 1 year of it as well, which was really, really fun.
Well, hopefully I paved the way for you getting to do that. I don't know. I'd have to look at the dates, but I know there was 2 years that I went. And the second year, I took my wife along, so it worked out good.
Yeah, we should line up the dates and connect the dots and see, because that's thankfully Chick-fil-A really values kind of creative, like out of the box thinking and innovation. So they value things like sketch notes and graphic facilitation, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. It was a great opportunity, and like you, it sort of opened my mind to, hey, there's something about this thing. They're going to pay to fly me down and put me in a hotel and then pay me to do the work. That was pretty cool. So
yeah, it's awesome.
I definitely see they valued it. So interesting question. When you first started the company, it was just you doing the work. When did you decide that you needed more than just you to do the work? Was there a breaking point? Or like, I can't take all these gigs, I need another person? Or what was that story?
Yeah, so there's really three factors to answer. There are three ways I can answer that question. The first way is that from day one, I never wanted it to just be the William Warren show. I never wanted to work by myself. I am an extrovert. I love people. I love working with people. I love occasional quiet work from home by myself day, but I'd rather have one of those in 4 days where I'm with people. So I always knew I didn't want to be alone. So from day one, I knew I wanted to grow a team, and I wanted to grow a scalable business, and I wanted to have people around me, and I wanted to have a culture and grow a brand. Like, those are all things that I was really intrigued by. So from day one, that was sort of the long-term vision, was to make this a bigger thing than just William, which is extremely hard to do when you're trying to scale and grow a creative business. It's not like we're making widgets or hamburgers. Like, we're making creative products and services, so it's really difficult. But I was, wanted to pursue it and see it happen. The second thing is that, as you alluded to, there was one of the first gigs I had. The client said, "Oh, well, we want you to sketch the main session, and then we want you to sketch the breakout sessions." And I'm like, okay, that's great. I don't have a time turner. If any Harry Potter fans are out there, like, I can't replicate myself and be in two places at once. So I literally have to have another person help out. And so I remember I called up my friend Jai, who's still one of our amazing sketch artists, still working with us. And I said, hey, I'm going to go to Orlando and do this really weird thing. We're going to go in a meeting. We're going to draw what they're talking about. You're a creative dude. You seem like flexible and cool. So come with me and let's do this. So we flew down there and did that gig together. And, he was in a breakout and I was in a breakout. And so, that was the second factor, was just logistically, there had to be more than just me. Like, it was impossible. And this was long before Zoom, long before events were recorded or pre-recorded. Like, this was live in a ballroom in Orlando in different breakouts. And then the third reason, I think the thing that really started to light the fire of scaling up and hiring a team was I had my first kid. That was in 2016. So in 2014 and 2015 and most of 2016, I was working like 70, 80-hour weeks.
Wow.
I was doing the sketching, I was doing the operations, I was doing the sales, I was doing all the factors that go into running a business. And so in 2015, I started to kind of explore hiring full-time people. That was when we've hired our first 2 full-time roles. But in 2016, when our first son was born, I remember sitting down with my wife and her saying to me, like, this work schedule has to change. We can't. And I agree with her. I was getting burned out. I was. I remember one night staying up till 4 a.m. the day before my grandfather's funeral to finish a client project, and then getting 3 hours of sleep, and then going and eulogizing my grandfather's funeral. So I was like, this lifestyle has to change. So those three factors really led to the desire and the drive to start scaling up, hiring people, delegating, finding people who are far better than I am at doing aspects of the business, and then empowering them to go and be excellent at those things. So that's really the story about how Sketchnote went from a side hustle kind of a creative outlet to a business. Now we have 11 full-time team members and a handful of contractors, and it's been an exciting journey.
Well, it's interesting, like you talked about the train leaving the station. In some ways, it's like you had this initial vision that you wanted it to be more than just you, partly because that's your personality and what you liked and what your dream was. And then like these pivot points were like the reminders from the business that, remember what you said, you need more people. Well, we got to get Jaya. Remember what you said, like this can't be sustained. It sort of pushed you, like that push forward to like make the move. So that's pretty interesting to hear how those things all work together to move you to the place where you're at now.
It's been great.
Question for you then is, okay, so you sort of brought us up to the point of like maybe up to 2019 when things were quote unquote normal, whatever that even means, where you're flying to ballrooms or businesses or whatever, and you're doing it in person in front of large crowds or small crowds. That changed in 2020, right? So how did you and the business deal with that? I know a little bit. If you want to go back and listen to Alejo's interview after this, you'll hear his perspective. I would love to hear your perspective because, I have 10, 11 people. I don't know what your staff was at the time, and suddenly the world changes overnight. You've got to be pretty adaptable. How did you deal with that?
Well, thankfully, adaptability is one of our 6 core values. And 2020 really put that to the test. It was like, all right, time to prove it. Are you adaptable or are you not? And to give you a bit of context, ever since 2013, our company has grown. We've grown up and to the right. We've hired people. Our revenues have gone up. Our clientele has gone up. 2020 was the most disruptive year. The first year where we just really got dominated. As many people did, especially in our industry, and anyone who works in events, hospitality events, any type of job that requires people to be on site and together, we all just got our clocks cleaned in 2020.
Yeah.
And so I remember vividly, I was reflecting with my team about this the other day, but I remember in February when it started to kind of rumble, like there started to be this kind of like growing building anxiety about this COVID thing. I was like, no big deal. It's going to blow over, like whatever. And then I remember talking to my salespeople at the time, being like, these like leads are drying up. Like people aren't reaching out anymore. Like we're having events get canceled. And I remember the first thing, we had an event in Seattle and we had 2 artists on deck to fly out there. And it was like late February and the client canceled. And we're like, you're canceling because of this COVID thing, like coronavirus? Like, this is weird. Like, come on. Yeah. And so we watched our sales pipeline dry up, and then we watched gigs get canceled, and we watched gigs get postponed. And then overnight, our revenues dropped 80%.
Wow,
over year over year. So we're like, this is a problem. We need to deal with this. And, at the time, we're like, what can we do? Well, the first thing we could do is pivot to virtual. And thankfully, we had already laid the groundwork for this as a company. In 2019, this is a story about why innovation is not just a buzzword, but actually a really critical thing that can save your business. In 2019, we decided in the spirit of innovation to buy our whole team iPads and buy our whole team Apple Pencils and Procreate and teach and train how to do sketchnoting digitally. We had done it before. It was a thing we had done, but it was always sort of a peripheral kind of like a novelty thing. Like, oh, well, we can do it the old-fashioned way with markers on foam core and paper, or we can do it digitally. And so some of our clients thought that was cool, but the vast majority kind of wanted the traditional approach to graphic recording. So thankfully in 2019, we laid the groundwork. So when 2020 happened, we were able to pivot quickly. And within a matter of days, I remember Alejo and I came to the office. We hired a videographer that we know. We're like, we're going to make a new product and we're going to call it Remote Notes. We're going to give it this kind of catchy name called Remote Notes, and we're going to launch it. And so within a matter of days, we scripted, filmed, produced, and launched a new website or a new landing page with a new product called Remote Notes. And we went to all of our clients and we one by one, we emailed them. We're like, hey, we know these are hard times. We know that you're disrupted. We're disrupted too. We're here for you. We have a solution. If you want to make your virtual meetings a little bit more engaging, we'd love to log in as a virtual attendee and sketch your meeting. And this is kind of a Hail Mary. You know, at the time, we weren't sure if this would resonate, if people had the appetite for it, the budget for it, if they wanted it. And so for the first few months, we sold a few of these, but it was definitely not enough to make up for the lost revenue from live events. So for about 3 to 4 to 5 months, we were just like in the red, like losing money. I was stressing about keeping my team on the payroll, like all these things I never thought about before. I would never worried about like, hey, when do we need to lay people off? Like I'm like doing the math and the forecasting, like, okay, well, we have this much run rate or this much runway before we have to start making hard decisions. Thankfully, we never had to do that with our full-time team. The product did take off. So at the end of the summer, virtual events really started to take off. I think once people realized that this COVID thing wasn't just going to go away overnight, that we were going to be in it for a little bit longer than we expected. And so we started selling virtual events, virtual engagements. And then the fall and then winter was great. We had our best quarter ever.
Wow.
So like our sales was kind of like the hockey stick. It was like just bottomed out in the spring and then just like started to build up and then just shoot up at the end of the year. So it was a wild year, but I think it was good for us as a business because it forced us to think outside the box. Like, how do you do sketchnoting and graphic recording when people can't be together, when there's no markers, when there's no paper? Like, how do you like? It's really like it was a living laboratory of an innovation disruption exercise. Like with the world, if the world turns upside down, literally, how are you going to keep your business going? How are you going to keep your work going?
Good challenge.
And so, and then as a team, it was a great year for us as a team just to rally around each other. Like we were kind of all in the trenches together. I was honest with my team about the financials. Like, this is what we have. Don't worry, we're not going to lay anyone off until this date. Like, so we're good. We're good for now. And I think the team really appreciated kind of being in that all together. And turning the ship around.
It's interesting. Something that struck me is it was really great that you did the innovation, you're ready, and you pitched it to those customers. I kind of have a feeling like maybe the customers had to get their own footing before they could think about it, right? So that might explain that spring, early summer, like, what are we going to do? Like, we're solving our own problem. Like, we love the idea, but we're not ready. And then maybe at some point in the summer, like, oh, we got this event, we're doing it remotely, let's get William's team in here. That would be awesome. The perfect alignment, right? So that would explain sort of the sudden takeoff. Is like the companies themselves had to figure out what they were doing. One question that sort of strikes me is, if things, let's say today, suddenly coronavirus ceased to exist, like we can't find it anymore and things are back to normal, we can do remote or we could do in person. What is your sense? And you obviously don't know because customers make these decisions, but do you get the sense that the remote notes are just a consistent part of your business now, and that maybe some companies actually prefer or choose those over the traditional for a variety of reasons? What would you think you might, if you were to make a guess and prognosticate?
Yeah, I think that the virtual sketching, virtual graphic recording is here to stay. And I think that's a good thing because I think there's some meetings that function better virtually. For instance, if you have a global team, it's not feasible to fly people in from Hong Kong and Tokyo and Budapest and England and all these places. Like, sometimes it makes sense to gather virtually. And I think that virtual events are not going to go away. I think that they're just going to find their truest and best context. Because at the same time, I also think that in-person events cannot be fully replaced. Right. Because there's nothing like being physically with somebody, rubbing shoulders, having all of your senses engaged, like hearing great music, eating great food, having camaraderie in person. So I think that to predict the future, the virtual events will settle into their best use case, their best context, and the in-person events will settle into their best context. and then we'll move forward doing both, with
Mm-hmm.
excellence, and doing both, meeting, adding value to both contexts, because the value add is the same. I'm convinced the
Mm-hmm.
value add, for graphic recording and sketch notes and interactive sketching, the value add is the same. We're making the meeting more engaging. We're making it more exciting. We're enhancing the learning experience for people. They're getting a better learning experience with the addition of visuals, and then we're extending the value of the event after the fact by giving them relevant, tangible takeaways
Mm-hmm.
that are fun to look at, that you can print out. I've got one here on my desk,
Mm-hmm.
from when I gave a keynote to my team.
That's nice.
Um, it's just the value that sketchnoting and graphic recording adds to events is really the same, whether it's virtual or in person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that both will be a permanent fixture in the event industry and with the visual practicing industry as well.
I agree. I think in some ways, like, you hate to. I mean, I wish there was no pandemic, but hey, this is reality. In some ways, I think it forced everybody to innovate, and I think for the visual thinking space, maybe it was actually a godsend, because we might have like hung around and like, yeah, that digital thing is nice, but we can do it in person, and like it allowed us to not like. It was like those the items you cited where, hey, Jai, we got to go to Orlando, right? You were forced to make a decision and do something, and it changed your business probably, right? It made it, okay, I talked about wanting to have a team. Now I really need a team, right? It wasn't like theoretical
Exactly.
anymore in the same way. And I think, so exactly what you're saying, like the digital remote thing I think it actually expands the opportunity for visual notes to appear, because there might have been like, yeah, it's 5 of us we're meeting and they're all over the world. We can't afford to fly anybody. Where would we fly them? Now you can do
Yeah.
it remotely. It now opens up a channel that never existed. So there's all these new opportunities to apply these remote note-taking things. I think that on the
Exactly.
opposite, I would say on the opposite side, on the in-person, because of that actually makes the in-person more valuable, more desirable, more special, right? So there's fewer, but they have more impact. Like, wow, I got to meet in
Right.
person now means something. It's sort of like when emails became really common. Like getting a handwritten personal note in the mail is like, wow, this is awesome, right? Like it amplifies the other thing. So in some ways, it took this narrow thing that we used to do and like forced it open and made it the opportunity there if you're willing to go for it, right? And it sounds like Sketch Effect is willing to go for it and ready to go for it, which is really cool to hear.
Well, I'm a big believer that every challenge is an opportunity in disguise. Every challenge is an opportunity to to rise to the occasion. I'm a big believer in growth mindset. That when you get handed a really difficult situation, that it is an opportunity to grow, and it's an opportunity to expand what you're able to do. And a good example for that is, like, I'm not a good tech person. Like, I'm the first one to admit that. Like, thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
Alejo and others on our team are really wired to think well with the tech side of things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. So when the whole world went virtual, a part of me panicked because I'm an analog guy. I love
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I love tactile. I love to feel the paper. I love to feel the markers. I like to get ink on my fingers. And so, I was a little bit worried. Oh, we're all going virtual. It's all going to be on iPads. Like, I don't know if I can handle this. But growth mindset. We can do it. We can rise to the occasion. We can figure it out. And yeah, every challenge is an opportunity in disguise,
Mm.
both in business and in life. And you nailed it. Like, I think that the COVID pandemic, even though extremely disruptive in the short term, and I wouldn't wish it on us ever again, it did force us to think differently about how do we do what we do, and it's opened up the globe now. If you're an amazing sketchnoter and you live in like Phnom Penh, Cambodia or something, and you would never get flown to London, then, all of a sudden, if you're out there, you can get hired. You can
Mm-hmm.
do amazing work for companies all around the globe. We're now talking to artists that are in different markets. Like, before, when we would hire new artists, we would be looking at what city are they in? Like, are they near a big airport? Can they
Mm-hmm.
can they physically get? And now those parameters are thrown out the window. It's like, if you're a talented sketch note or you're a talented graphic recorder and you can work digitally, I don't care where you live. You could
Yeah.
live in, Paraguay or somewhere that,
Mm-hmm.
um, that would never have an in-person, summit for a big corporate event. But if you're great, we can work with you. And then from a business standpoint, the clientele now is worldwide. Like we can work with clients and companies all over the world in different languages. And that's one thing that we're working on now at the Sketch Effect is like, how do we serve different clients, different time zones, different languages, and all sorts of stuff like that. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Wouldn't want to relive it. I'm hoping for more stability. I'm hoping 2022 is the year of stability and just like smooth, and just like kind of just like get back to the basics. But
once is enough.
Yeah, one pandemic. I can do one. Can't do two.
1918 had theirs. We had ours. Okay.
Exactly.
100 years from now, you can deal with yours.
Exactly.
So we're sort of on this topic of pandemic in a fun way. What are some of the things that you and your family did to kind of keep yourself sane when like all the things you normally did stopped and when the places you went closed, or like what were some of the things that you did for fun to kind of counterbalance that?
Well, this was not for fun, but there's a craft beer place like a half a mile down the road. So I drank a lot of craft beer, but no, actually healthy things. I love getting outdoors. I love exercise. I love working out. I love running. So for me, like getting outside was like my therapy. Like just getting out, going for a long run. When I run, I think clearer. I start to make connections. I start to think about problems, how to solve them. I start to have epiphanies. So that's a big one for me is just getting out there and getting active and getting my blood pumping and going on a great run, listening to good music as well. In terms of new hobbies I took up, I don't know if I did take up any new hobbies. I think I just doubled down on the things that I loved already doing, like the working out and the exercise. But I was one of those crazy people that actually traveled during the pandemic. I love traveling. Traveling also fills my soul and kind of fills me up. And so, believe it or not, I actually traveled. I went to Istanbul and I went to Belgrade, Serbia in October of 2020 because they were two of the only countries that were letting people in. So my buddy and I were like, let's go. And we took the PCR test and did all the things and did it legally. But that was another thing, was just like trying to replicate like the travel experience in big and small ways, whether it's going to like a different neighborhood in your city you've never been to, or even hopping on a plane.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities, like being a visitor in your own town, exploring places, because you're just so busy living your life, you don't often go to those places, or maybe you take the tour that the tourists get, and you learn something about your city that you didn't know before. That could be a fun way to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Interesting. This episode of the Sketchnote Army Podcast is brought to you by Concepts, an infinite canvas sketching app built for tablets with a stylus, like the iPad Pro, Microsoft Surface, and Samsung Galaxy Tab. Concepts Infinite Canvas lets you spread out and sketch in any direction. Everything you draw in Concepts is a flexible vector, so you can move your notes around the canvas or change their color, tool, or size with a simple gesture. Search Concepts in your favorite app store for infinite, flexible sketching. Well, let's switch into tools. I know you mentioned you got your team iPad Pros and pencils, so I'm guessing that you probably got some experience with that in Procreate. So let's start first with analog, though. Pencils, pens, papers, any kind of tools what are the things you enjoy that you like to use?
My favorite thing for drawing, just like not necessarily sketching, but just drawing, is I just love a black gel pen. Let's see, what do I have? Like this guy, the Energel.
Yeah, those are good ones.
This is like the metal barrel, which is like super cool. It just
fancy.
Feels cool. And then I also love just using Tombow markers for like shading and color.
And those are nice because they have two nibs, right? There's the brush side and then the small nib side on the other side.
Yeah, we got the brush. This is a video podcast. You can see.
So we can show. If you're listening on the podcast and audio, you can watch the video and check it out.
Yeah, and then both of those are useful. And then if I want to, if I'm doing actually analog sketchnoting, I like to use a solvent-based pen. I don't think I have any right around here. But there's a pen I love called the gosh, I'm blanking on the name. Clearly, I don't love it as much because I can't recall the name. Blame my kid. I blame my kid. I'm sleep deprived. But it's a solvent based marker, and it's got two tips too. It's got like a bullet tip, and it's got like a fine tip, and those are great because used in tandem with the water based Tombos, they don't bleed each other.
Don't bleed with each other.
So you can do this really beautiful typography with your solvent marker, and then you can come in and kind of fill it in with a color, and it doesn't bleed, and it looks super awesome. So that's my go-to for personal sketchnoting. I think I actually have an example right here. Let's see here.
And then when you say solvent, for people that don't know, that's like a Sharpie marker, alcohol-based,
Correct.
basically. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, any marker that stinks is a solvent marker. If you get a headache as you sniff it, which I don't recommend that, don't do that. But if it's got a fume to it, that's a solvent-based marker. And the opposite, of course, is water-based, which is what we use for all of our in-person graphic recording because it's safe. It's not going to cause fumes.
Right.
Fun side note. One of my first graphic recording gigs, I used a solvent-based marker, and it did not go over very well because the room got fumy, and people were like, "Man, we need to like air this out." So. That's one of my fails from early days.
Getting your customers high, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like this is a sketch note where I use the solvent based. So like you can do like cool like drawings. Sorry, I'm like looking at the camera. It's reversed.
Yeah,
like, draw this and like fill it in with this green color, and it doesn't bleed. It doesn't.
Solvent holds that edge.
It doesn't get muddy. Yeah.
So what do you have a paper that you like to use? Looks like you're using loose sheets. Is that your typical choice? Like a marker oriented loose sheet of paper, or do you use notebooks? What's your preference there?
If I am sketching just for myself personally, so like I think this is one thing that is always a good distinction when you're talking to the sketchnoting community, is that there's a bunch of different contexts. There's personal sketchnoting and there's also professional, and the way you go about both can be very different. Yeah. So if I'm doing personal sketchnoting, like if I'm just in a meeting and I'm just doodling in my notebook, I use a Moleskine. I like the Moleskine sketchbook with the thick paper, the thick unlined paper. I love that because I like to keep all my ideas in a book. And then as soon as the book is done, I label it with the year and the dates, and I shove it in my drawer so I can reference it later. But if we're doing sketchnoting for clients, we use loose leaf paper because we can strap it onto a clipboard, and then we can physically hand it over. Like if it's in a sketchbook, then you got to like rip it out or cut it out or something.
Right.
So yeah, I love what is it? I should know this, but like a heavy paperweight, like probably 120.
Okay. It can handle the inking and stuff and not bleed through the back.
It can exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Especially you don't want to leave, especially if you're using a solvent-based marker, you don't want to leave spots on the table you're working on, or assuming you don't bring your own. But yeah, interesting.
Exactly. And then digital, we use iPads, we use Procreate. It's it's state of the art. Lots of amazing tools, a lot of shortcuts, really cool things you can do with the digital medium. But if I had to choose between the two, I just love analog. I mean, we talked about this already. I love just like feeling the paper. I love making mistakes and then figuring out how to fix it. With digital's great, but also digital can also be paralyzing because if you make a mistake, you can like delete it, replace it, move it, resize it, and before you know it, so especially if you're sketchnoting in a live content context. You're gonna miss content. You're gonna lose track of the ideas because you're so busy perfecting the little thing you did. Whereas with analog sketchnoting, you kind of have to just like make the mark and move on. I think both are awesome. Both are incredible, and we love both. And I should probably even get better at the digital. But yeah, the iPad's awesome. Procreate's awesome. Photoshop's awesome. I mean, we got Cintiqs in our office that we use sometimes. So that's a great tool as well. Those are my go-tos.
Those are great. Those are great tools. So the next question I have for you is, so imagine there's someone listening. I hope there's someone listening who is a visualizer, whatever that means to them. they feel really good about the space. They're excited, but maybe they've just sort of hit a plateau, like at this point when they're listening, kind of just doing the same thing over, and they just need a little inspiration to kind of maybe be explorational or inspirational to go up a little bit in their process. What would be 3 things you might recommend to someone like that to help them break out of that plateau?
Yeah, the first thing I would do would be I would encourage people to give themselves boundaries. I think that there's a sense that like creativity flourishes best when you're just like unhindered and free and floating and you can do all these things. I actually don't think that's true. I think creativity flourishes when with restrictions, with boundaries. So if you find you're hitting a plateau, I would encourage people to give themselves artificial boundaries. Like try doing it in black and white only, try doing it without color, try sketchnoting really small, try doing it really big, try doing it digital if you're an analog guy, try doing it analog if you're a digital person. I think boundaries are really healthy to have, not just in creativity, but in life as well. So that's the first thing I would encourage, is just give yourself some boundaries. The second thing is, this is a visualization hack that I like, which is when I'm trying to think about how to visualize something, I imagine what would my favorite movie or TV show do with this idea or this concept. So I think I saw you have a Mandalorian thing on your wall. Is that right?
Yeah.
So like, if I'm thinking about this idea, how would this play out in a scene in the Mandalorian? Like, just kind of visualizing as a movie helps you kind of push yourself outside of your out of your typical kind of creative box. And then number three, I would say pursue adjacent creative activities. So like if you're someone who loves to draw and drawing is your thing, but you're hitting a plateau, then why don't you try painting? Bust out some paints, try painting, see how that goes, or try music. Try doing different things. I think that creativity is one of those things that, as you pursue it in other areas, the adjacent areas will start to thrive as well. They'll be fed by that adjacent creative energy. And so, think of things that you haven't done in a long time. Like, I love oil painting. I did a lot of oil painting back when I was in college. And it's one of those things I'm like, I need to get back into it. If you have a creative thing that you used to love to do, like, go back to that, try it out, try new stuff. Get together in groups, in like social groups, and do creative work together, feed off each other's energy. Because creative burnout and plateauing is a real thing. It's a real thing that we don't talk enough about. And I think there's a lot of strategies and tactics to mitigate that.
Well, those are 3 great ones. Thanks for those, William. Really, really
sure
liked all
thing.
3. So I guess the final question is, how can people find you? Like websites, social media accounts? What's the best way to get in touch with you? And then also Sketch Effect, the company that you run.
Yeah, so if folks want to connect with me, I'm on Instagram at, my handle is The Conquering Creative. So it's a platform that is really more about equipping creatives with basic business ideas, business concepts. Sometimes very straightforward, like how do you read a P&L statement? Like, what are the key things to look for? And sometimes more kind of encouragement, like just around the idea of like running your own business or trying to figure out business. Because for a lot of creatives, for most creatives, the business stuff does not come naturally to us. We went into a creative field because we like the creative work. We like drawing, sketching, painting, designing, whatever it is. And so the business stuff tends to get put on the back burner, or it tends to be something that we're either afraid of, intimidated by, or bored with. And so this Conquering Creative platform is really created just to give back some advice and some practical tips for people. So I encourage people to connect with me there. That's where I'm most active on Instagram. The Sketch Effect, of course, you can find us on Instagram at The Sketch Effect, online at thesketcheffect.com, on LinkedIn, on all the channels. The team has been doing great content lately. It's been awesome. So I encourage people to check it out. And shoot us a note. I mean, we love the Sketchnote community. We love adding value, sharing tips, sharing mistakes, sharing all the things. So I encourage people to check us out there and shoot us a comment. Let us know what you want to learn about. or talk about.
Yeah, you guys have been doing a great job teaching. I've noticed the teaching both in courses, but also like micro teaching using Instagram to teach concepts and show ideas and encourage. So I think I really like when I see that sort of pouring back into the community. I mean, we have a great community that's really welcoming and encouraging, and it's good to see a group like yours that's doing this professionally, really giving back and encouraging. I mean, it makes sense because it's very likely the next employee that you're going to hire is going to come from this community. So to invest in that community makes total sense, and it's a win-win for everybody, right? So thank you for that.
Absolutely. We've enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, this has been really great to have you on, William. It's really good to hear your story. I didn't know that story. It's possible we were in the same room, in the green room at the Chick-fil-A Leadercast, where I had my first Chick-fil-A sandwich.
If only we knew. Yeah, we should go back and retrace that history. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll have to dig it up. And for everybody who's listening, when we do, we'll have show notes, so we'll find links to the pen that William couldn't remember the name of. We'll put that in there. And if you're listening to the audio, of course, go back and check out the video. You can see that side of it as well. We're doing YouTube this season. So thanks so much for being on the show, William. This is really great. I really have enjoyed this discussion with you.
Yeah, Mike, this is awesome. Shout out to you, all the great work you're doing. You are one of the pioneers of this whole world. And so I appreciate just what I've learned from you. And I got your book on the shelf right behind me. So thanks for doing this podcast. Thanks for keeping this community going and giving back to it. And next time you're in Atlanta, we'll hang out. Next time I'm in Milwaukee, we'll hang out. And appreciate the opportunity to share. Hopefully this was valuable to your listeners. And let's keep sketching. Yeah,
that sounds great. Well, for everyone listening to or watching the show, this will be another Sketchnote Army podcast. Until the next episode, talk to you soon. The Sketchnote Army Podcast was created by me, Mike Rohde, and brought to you by Rohde Design Studios. It's produced and edited by Alec Polianis of AMP Creative Studios. The theme music was created by John Schiedermeyer. To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends, and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.